I'm Janet.
I'm Jacia.
I'm Rachel, and this is What is Happening.
Hi everyone. Oh, is that how we start our podcast?
Oh, it's in today's episode.
Oh shit. Okay, sorry. It's like I'm fucking filming a YouTube video. What the fuck?
Welcome to our
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. In today's episode, we'll be talking about superstitions. And in light of that, we just want to say happy Lunar New Year. Gong hei fa choi. Yeah. So yes. Janet, you can start us off.
Um, well, I was actually interested in talking about this topic because I overheard my parents, not my parents, well, my mom talking about um like 考 team during Chinese New Year. Um, and I was wondering like they were getting really into it, and I was sitting in a living room listening to them talk about it, and I was like, why? Like maybe it's just me. Like, do I am I just missing the Chinese spirit? But I don't know. I don't really believe in them, and I want to know why people believe in superstitions and why they exist. Do you guys believe in any superstitions?
Um, Not really. It's like in terms of like going closer to like Chinese New Year, right? It's I think for us is or at least for me, it's more like tradition. Like I don't really believe in well, I don't know. Like yeah, I don't really believe in superstitions, but I know my parents do. Like so we have like we always do like, clean the house or whatever, or like my grandparents clean their house. We don't really clean our houses, but like take a shower with those like leaf thingies. And
Oh
then
yeah.
yeah, we do that all the time. Like I use that just because like I'm told to, or like at least I feel better if I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or like my parents are like really into like feng shui. Um, like they move houses because of feng shui. Like if the feng shui is not good, then they'll move. Yeah, and then like it's 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 interesting. I want to say it's strange, but it's interesting. Yeah.
That's cool because my parents don't believe in like superstitions, but my grandparents do. So, like when you said the leaves thing, it was because my grandma told us to use it, and it's like better safe than sorry, you know. Don't want anything to happen in case like I don't use it. So that's why I like kind of follow it.
Well, for me, I feel like believing in superstitions and like doing them are two separate things. So like even though I don't necessarily believe in superstitions, like similar to Jacia, I still do them, maybe out of respect or just because it's tradition. And I
Mhm.
think it's interesting because even though um my dad's the same as me. My dad doesn't really believe in superstitions, but he just does it because my mom tells him to. And there's some weird superstitions that mm, I feel like, well, for my mom, like people who do follow them, it's almost like it gives her a sense of security. Like, um, almost as if you do it, it ensures that you'll have good luck or stuff like that. Well, like for me this year, even though I don't believe in superstitions, I still like participated in some. Like for example, I washed my hair on like Lin Sam Man, which is like Chinese New Year's Eve. And because my mom was like, "Oh, you have to wash it today, like wash away all the like bad luck or like all the bad spirits or whatever." So I did it. And the thing is, even though I don't believe it, it's not like um doing it caused any harm. So I was wondering like if there was any mm, valid connection between believing in a superstition and it actually being, I guess, useful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
So like
think
you don't necessarily have to believe in the superstition for it to be useful, and I guess that's why they still exist.
mm, I think it's more of like a self-fulfilling prophecy thing. If you believe in it, then you subconsciously try to make it true, and then when it becomes true, you like have a stronger belief in the superstition. And I think it's like a cycle that keeps repeating. And that's why it's like being passed down in generations because everyone, when you start believing in it and then you like propagate it. This is sounding like TOK.
Well, for me, I also think that um I feel like because we study in international schools, like this is something I've thought about. There's a lot of Chinese traditions I've noticed that I'm not like acutely aware of. And I'm sort
Mhm.
of scared that from my generation onwards, because of my like semi disconnect with the culture, like the cultural traditions, beliefs, and values will not necessarily like propagate or like pass on to the
Mhm.
next generation. And like maybe it'll end with me, like some aspects of the tradition. And I feel like superstitions might be one of them. And like if you think about it, I don't believe in superstitions, right? So that shouldn't really trouble me at all. But for some reason, it does. And it's and it's almost like it's kind of mountain. It's like ironic. Um, yeah. So I feel like superstitions to me exist not because I feel like they work, but because I feel like by doing them, I'm respecting the culture or like my heritage or some sorts. Does that resonate with you guys?
Yeah, I think so too. Because when you said because we're from international schools, we're kind of semi disconnected from the culture, I related to that because I didn't really know or was aware of things like washing your hair before New Year's because my parents already don't believe in it. So it like then passed down to me. I learned about these things from other people's families, but then it's a disconnect from our culture or heritage because I won't pass it down either. How about you, JC?
Mm. I think I've thought about this, or just more so the idea of like passing down stuff. And I feel like um I guess I would pass like I feel like I would just do it for the sake of this is how I've done it and I want my kids to do it this way. Or like I don't know, like I guess I do agree to an extent that because our generation is so like I guess like distant. Maybe this doesn't go for everyone, but I feel like it goes for like most people, right? Like Gen Z, okay. Um, we're a weird bunch, but I feel like it's like we sort of create our own culture in a sense that is not really traditional. So I guess like in a way, some or maybe like I would end up not passing things off to future generations. And I don't know, I think that's a bit scary because like am I destroying years of practice that my ancestors did, just because I don't believe in it too? Or should I pass it down just for the sake of, you know, passing it down, I guess.
Well, for me, I also think it has to do with us being, I guess, surrounded by more scientific knowledge. Like Rachel, you saying your parents not believing in superstitions doesn't actually surprise me because they like work, they're like doctors and nurses, right? So they're like part of like an elite, like academic, like intellectual sort of group of people in society, right? So actually, it doesn't surprise me that these people who really like live and breathe science every day don't believe in superstitions because to me, science and I guess like cultural or like traditional superstitions don't actually connect or like work well with each other. And I think even though, like I said, I'm afraid that my disconnect with the culture will eventually lead to like the demise or like the destroying or of like failure to pass on these traditions. I also think another reason is because well, like even because of technology, we've become so much more in touch with like just knowledge in general. Like it's so easy for us to learn and connect with like science. It's much more difficult for us to believe in superstitions as a form of, I guess, almost like a safety net or like an anchor. Like like I said, for my mom and my parents, I feel like they turn to these superstitions as a form, like in the same way that religion serves a sort of a grounding purpose. And I feel like that doesn't really resonate with us as much as past generations would. So maybe that is just a function of change or inevitable progress, maybe.
So do you think that like because we said we might not pass down these kind of thoughts and values to our future generation, that in the future when the generation doesn't believe in these thoughts that it would be detrimental to our culture? Or do you think that like because of advancements in society that we should change our culture? Or what's the importance of keeping these kind of values when, like, perhaps we don't believe in it because we find no value in them?
Well, to me, I feel like superstitions and like traditional cultural values and stuff play an important role in sort of acting sort of like a glue almost. It's like there's this central thing that this group of people believe in and subscribe to that sort of unites everyone. Like I was texting Ines this morning and I was like, "Oh, did you celebrate Chinese New Year?" Because she's in Canada, right? And she was like, "Oh, I couldn't celebrate with my parents, but we had a Chinese New Year dinner yesterday." And it's like even in Canada where like you're surrounded by really like um a subdued or like a it's like less of a Chinese or like a Asian sort of influence. She still had this like New Year dinner with her friends from like Vietnam or like her Chinese friends, her Hong Kong friends, her Thai friends. And I feel like that's just proof of like these superstitions and values being sort of a glue of bringing people together. And really, I guess if you think about it, that's the point of like Chinese New Year, like Lunar New Year, right? It's the connections between people, like the group relationships.
Um, but yeah, like I definitely do agree with that because even like my brother who is in the US, like although we have like family there, um they didn't really celebrate it together. They literally just shipped him food in a box. And he was like, okay. And he well, like shared it with his friends. And I think like something as big as Chinese New Year, I feel like that is something that will never, I guess, go away. Because I think no matter like if you practice what you usually do at home, or like if you don't, like you'll still celebrate it some way, right? Because it's just like it's a holiday that you grew up celebrating. So it's similar to like what like Christmas or whatever, right? Like you'll still celebrate it, but maybe just in a different way. But I think um maybe you might lose um the very traditional things, but like I think you'll find a way or people will find a way to still celebrate it with the intentions that oh um either like paying respects or like just sort of connecting more with your culture. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so speaking of superstitions, I actually think it's quite related to maybe like good luck charms and the idea of believing in something that we don't actually have concrete proof of like bringing us or giving us value. Um, and I used to play like basketball, right? And I remember I had these red like Raptors lucky socks that I would wear to every game because, well, like they were my lucky socks, right? They were my good luck charms, so I wore them to every game. And the thing is, it's obvious that there's no actual solid evidence that these socks gave me good luck or like increased my abilities to perform like on the court. I was wondering if you guys had any like good luck charms and like looking back, do you think they work maybe in some indirect way? Or if you still do you think it still works?
Personally, I try to like create a lucky charm. Like whenever I perhaps do on a test, and then that day I was wearing like this bracelet. Then the next time I'll try to wear the same bracelet to do another test. So hopefully, like the good luck carries on. But then it never works. I always fluctuate. So I stopped believing in it ever since then. How about you,
Um,
JC?
I sort of, but not really. So it's more so my grandparents and my mom. So we all wear, or like, yeah. So everyone in my family, or usually like most of the adults, the kids, like they don't really care, but whatever, it's their kids. Um, they wear what's the Chinese thing? It's called like a jun. So it's like the little charm. Right. Okay. If I send you a photo, maybe you'll know because my camera's not on. Wait, let me send you a photo. You just like cut
Is
this
it
part
like a
out.
stone almost? It's like with spots.
Yeah. So
Okay, yeah. I have one of
yeah,
those.
and it looks different. Because like your whole so I sent a photo to the Insta. Um, yeah, so my whole family has these. Because my grandma actually like sells them. So we don't have a choice. We have to wear them. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like those. Um, and she says that we have to wear them or at least hang them near our beds for good luck and to literally like push away like the evil spirits. But I think this is more of like maybe it's like more common for me because my grandma literally has a shop full of them, and my mom like buys like you know necklaces for her to sell, and yeah, so it's like all over our house. Um, but I guess like if I'm really really feeling anxious, then I always have one near my bed anyways, and I don't really believe like because sometimes I actually just forget about them until like I look at them like oh okay, but I like sort of believe in them. And I know my grandparents really believe in them because she told us this whole story of she was sleeping and there were some like spirits that woke her up, like some evil spirits. And she literally got all of her freaking things out and was like, go away. And then it went away. And I was like, what the heck? Okay, maybe she was just having a nightmare, but we don't know that. But yeah, like I do sort of believe in them, Lucky Charms. But as I grew older, I'm just like, okay, whatever. It's like I usually use Lucky Charms for tests, but as you grow older, you realize tests is if you study hard enough. But yeah.
Well, like for me, I feel like Lucky Charms serve a similar purpose to what Rachel talked about in the beginning. So like a self-reinforcing, or sorry, what did you say? A
Fulfilling.
self-reinforcing, a
Self-fulfilling.
self-fulfilling. Yeah, it's like self-fulfilling, right? So like it boosts your confidence. So like if you believe this thing will actually improve your performance, then you believe that you wearing it, you believe you will perform better by wearing it or like whatever. So that boosts your confidence, and in turn, because you have a more, I guess, generally more optimistic outlook of whatever you're doing, you actually tend to perform better. So I was listening to another podcast the other day, and they talked about something called the stereotype threat. So what the stereotype threat is you actually acting differently based on what you think others think of you. So, for example, the test that the professors like conducted, they had like a math test that they gave like guys and girls, and then they told the girls that in this test, well, actually, um, both guys and girls performed this at the same level. And so when once the girls like took the test, they actually produced the same result as the guys did. But if they didn't tell them that, oh, in this test, guys and girls actually performed the same, the girls actually performed worse because of the stereotype that like, oh, girls aren't good at math or like girls aren't good at science and stuff like that. So it's almost like this psychological, what is this called? The psychological effect or like this uh phenomenon like flipped on its head. It's like you believing that you will do good because of this lucky charm will actually lead to you performing better. It's like manifesting, but in a more scientific, but in a scientifically proven way. Like maybe that's why manifesting works. Is because
Yeah.
if you put your heart to it, if you put your mind to it, then the likelihood of you actually, achieving this feat will increase because you believe in yourself and you believe in the others around you. So I think that's more maybe an important lesson if we move away from superstition without any like evidence or scientific ground and apply it to something else. And I guess maybe that's why it works, and maybe that's why people uh, participate in it or still believe them and still do them. Food for thought.
That's actually so interesting. Because I think I've heard of something similar, like not the experiment, but more so like if you put your mind to it, then it'll happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so far we've been talking a lot about superstitions that we can kind of control to some extent. Like lucky charms, we can choose to wear them or not wear them. Like the traditions of like cleaning your house and things like that, we can have some control. But what if like it's something that is out of our control? So for example, like I was reading this SCMP article a few days ago, and it was about the Chinese zodiac signs and kind of their predictions for what our year would be. And sadly, they predicted that the year of the horse and the year of the sheep will have a very difficult and challenging year. And it's out of our control. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you believe that because this feng shui master said that we'll have a bad year, that it'll actually be true, or like what kind of aspects can we control so we can change our fate?
Mm, well, I know my mom believes in those because like every year around, just really around Chinese New Year, she buys a new like feng shui master book that she
My
reads.
mom too. Oh my God.
Can't relate.
She buys a new one every year, and she like reads it and like talks about like, oh my God, this year is gonna be tough. And then she like talks to my dad and like talks to me and be like, oh, you gotta like avoid these things this year and blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, mm, well, okay, maybe it's because um the book is in Chinese, so I guess I wouldn't really pick it up as much because I my Chinese is not that good. So similar to the Chinese zodiac feng shui, I guess I can relate it to like zodiac signs, like Western zodiac signs, like astrology. Like,
Mm.
are you a Cancer? Are you a, forgot the other signs. I don't, yeah, Leo, stuff like that. So I guess it's similar. Especially those Instagram posts where it's like, oh, if you're a Cancer, this week you will find the love of your life, like stuff like that. It's like, I used to believe in them. I was like, wait, this is actually so accurate. But then recently, I sort of realized how a lot of the statements that they push out are quite, they're like blanket statements almost. They're really, really generalized.
Mm.
Like, for example, they could say, oh, you're going through a tough time now, but it's okay. If you get beat down, you can just stand back up and start over again. Like stuff like that. It's so general. Like it applies to everyone. It doesn't, to me, I don't think it really matters what time of the year you were born in. It's like putting out a statement that's so general, like you've ought to at least make it applicable to some people, but obviously there's a subsection of the population that it won't apply to. But just for the section of the population that it does, those people are gonna go like, wait a second, you're so right. You get what I mean? It's like you throw a bunch of eggs at the wall and you just see which one works. That's I don't think that's the saying, but there's a similar saying. I've got it all wrong, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like I have a friend who like believes in this stuff, like religiously believes in this stuff. Like she has a freaking app downloaded on her phone that she can check for her whatever moon signs, star signs. And she's trying to get me into the club and she's like, you should download it. Like you're gonna know your fate. Like you can predict what's gonna happen to you. And I was like, okay, okay. And then like whenever I was talking to her, she would refer to like whatever her star sign or moon sign said that day. But then whatever she said, I feel like was still kind of generic, but to her it was like so accurate and so specific to her life. And I think that perhaps it just picks the aspects that a lot of people share, like what Dana
Yeah,
said. Like it
yeah.
picks majority of like what people would experience. And then for example, like you said, oh, this week you'll have a tough time. And then whose week doesn't like have a rough period? And then you'd like immediately connect it to the tough time that you have. And then you'll think, oh, that's so accurate. And then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy again. And then like you get like you believe in it even stronger. And then you just become my friend. Yeah.
That's why people make fun of us, like people who believe in astrology. Because it's so, okay, it's not dumb. Like sometimes I read, I'm like, oh shit, like that's me. But then you read everything else, and I'm like, how come that is not me? But I act like, yeah. So I think yeah, it's kind of strange. But I mean, okay, my boyfriend also has an app for freaking star signs, and he reads it like in the morning. And I'm like, do you believe in that? He's like, no, I just read it, just in case. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny. But I
Well,
mean, yeah.
mm, like I used to believe in them. I used to follow so many of those horoscope accounts, maybe until maybe 12, 13 months ago. I unfollowed all of them. Uh, mm, I think like astrology, zodiac signs, and these like fortune telling things, I feel like the reason it's so popular, even though if you like take a step back and really evaluate the situation, it doesn't take much to like realize how uh I guess mm, how should I put it? How unauthentic it is. Not unauthentic, but like how it works, like how people just put out general statements and then people are like, oh yeah, that applies to me. Like if you take a step back and actually take maybe like 10 minutes of your day to sort of look at the different posts, it's not hard to realize that this is what's happening. But I think the reason why it's still so popular is because it almost strips people away from the like it strips people of their responsibility or like their accountability for how their life will turn out. Do you know what I mean? It's almost as if, oh, if your life fucks up, then it's not your fault. It just so happens that astrology or like my sign says that, oh, because of how the moon or whatever, Saturn, Jupiter, whatever is positioned, it's just not going to go my way today. So therefore it's not my fault. And but at the same time, I feel like that's sort of dangerous because when things do actually go your way, at the same time you can go like, well, I'm just lucky because of how the planets are aligned today. Does that make sense? It's like it takes people away of their responsibility to actually have control over their lives and the way that mm, they would want it to be. And I think that's sort of dangerous almost. It's almost like it's an easy way out. Like I don't mean to, be like, oh, I'm taking the high road, blah 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 blah. Like that's not what I mean. It's just something I've noticed, I guess, or I think is why it's become so popular.
Yeah, true. Like I agree with what you said. Like the star signs, the moon signs, astrology, superstitions take away kind of our control over events that happen. And like for example, I know someone who's into these kind of things, and then like it's the same friend I spoke about before, super into these things, and then she'd tell me that because she's in university right now, and she's like, oh, the day that I got into this university, my star signs told me that I was going to have a good day, and that's why I kind of slowly believed in these star signs because they actually like become true. But then it kind of takes away the role of her hard work within the whole application process. It kind of takes away all of that
Mm-hmm.
and attributes it to only because of the way the stars are aligned. And I don't think it's a good way to approach
Yeah.
your successes or even your failures.
Like for me, like I said, I think it's like dangerous almost because it makes it very difficult for you to actually be satisfied or fulfilled with where you are because you sort of discount how hard you've worked to get where you are and all the things that you've done. Like for me, I feel like it's much more easier to be happy or like chasing happiness, I don't think is a good thing. Like I feel like by doing that, it's almost as if people are chasing happiness by placing this, it's like a what's it called? It's like a moving target. If you depend or if you like put your happiness or like your sense of satisfaction depending on how the stars align or how or when you're born or like stuff like that. I feel like it's much easier to be fulfilled if you actually take a step back and notice how hard you've worked and like give yourself credit where credit is due. It's almost like that sort of thing. And I don't know, like I just feel much safer knowing that these things are within my control and not in the control of something I can't control. That was a long sentence, but yeah, it's mm, like maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe few months or few years down the line, I'd look back and be like, you are so wrong. But like at this point in time, this is just how I think and how I feel.
Yeah, like so I do believe with, you know, the more people believe in it, the less I guess their self-worth probably decreases because they feel like if their astrology sign or whatever they believe in is not good today, then they can't do anything to control it. And I think that's why like I don't really believe in it is because like I know I can control things like to an extent, right? Obviously like bigger things like the weather or like the possibility of um freaking like having a test or not, right? Like I can't control
Yeah.
that, right? But if my astrology sign is bad, like I don't really care. Like, so what? It's not like I'm gonna die. Um, do you think people believe in astrology or just in like superstitions or feng shui or whatever, not because they've seen it once and it worked, but more so because they feel like something is missing from them.
Hmm. Okay, that's a good question. Because I feel like something is missing. Well, for me, like I feel like that uh I feel like this sort of applies to religion as well. It's like purpose. It's like people turn to these things for a source of purpose. Like sometimes I sit in my room and I think about how small we actually are, like in the grand scheme of things. Like just as individual, like people, like for example, like I don't mean this in like, oh, in like a bad way. Like for example, if I were to die tomorrow, like in the grand scheme of things, like in the whole, in the scale, the large scale, like universe wise, what actually changes? Like really, like nothing changes. And I think that just the thought of this is really scary for some people. And it's like these superstitions and religion and horoscopes or whatever, it gives people a sense of purpose. So, like to answer your question, yes, I feel like people believe in these things because it sort of fills a hole or like a gap. It's like I exist, it's that I should exist and I exist because of this. It's sort of like a motivating thing. Well, at least to me.
Yeah, and as JC said, like to fill something that's missing, I think that's also true because some things in life you just can't explain. And then when people like keep thinking about why things happen, they just kind of maybe attributed it to these supernatural things that occur and use it as an explanation to understand their lives better. So I think
Yeah.
it's like kind of a filler to fill out the gaps we have in our knowledge that cannot be explained like for example by science or by like reasoning.
Yeah, 100%. That's why yeah, 100%. Well, I also have another thought now. It's like going back to the whole cultural traditions thing. Say we don't believe in traditions. Do you think it's our responsibility? Like if we realize that maybe these superstitions don't actually hold any uh like scientifically or like backed up like ground or evidence, do you think it's our responsibility to tell the people around us that believe in these things that like, hey, like actually, if you look at it this way, things aren't actually the way you think they are? Like, is it, do you think it's our responsibility to at least initiate this conversation? Like not out of disrespect, but just because, you know, it's like us seeing something that we don't think they necessarily see. Like, do you think it's our responsibility to have this dialogue almost? Maybe with parents or grandparents or even friends?
That's a good question because I did speak to my like grandma about like why she kind of believes in some of the superstitions, and that conversation, like we didn't argue but like we just had very different opinions because I think she like grew up with those thoughts ingrained in her, so she kind of just believes in it as like an innate response. But then me studying in like an international school, and me like my parents not like giving me those like thoughts and values when I was young, that like because of the clashes between how we grew up, like whenever I'd explain to her about like for example she like it's controversial but she believes in like for example if I have to test tomorrow, then if she prays then I'll do well. Like I don't believe in that. So like whenever I tell her like, oh, I don't think it works like that, and then she'd tell me that, oh, it's better safe than sorry. Like why don't you just believe in what I do? And then I'd tell her that, oh, like you can do as you like, but I just don't personally believe in your practices. And then it was a very difficult conversation. And I think to some aspect, I kind of maybe to her gave off the feeling that I was like better than her because I didn't believe in like these kind of thoughts. So I think it's like a very careful conversation to be like had. Like you have to show that you respect what they do, but also state your opinion and your reasoning.
I've had similar conversations with my mom actually. And I feel like it's very difficult not to get defensive in situations like this, especially in something that you believe so firmly. Um, it's like a similar situation with, um, for example, like because I was like raised to be Catholic, right? And I went to church school and stuff, like we've gone over this. It's sometimes it's like the argument that keeps coming up is why not just stay religious or why not just believe in God? So even if you die, like there's a chance that you can still go to heaven and not hell. Like if you just believe it, like it's almost like a win-win situation. And it's like, okay, if you choose not to believe in like God now, like when you die, you might face the consequence of going to hell. It's like that sort of situation. But the thing is, I feel like there are other factors to consider. It's like I'd rather live a life where I'd rather live a conscious life where my decisions are within my own hands and within my own control and not in the control of others. Like I don't know how that is with you guys.
I Yeah, because I feel like for me personally, because this is going really deep, but no one knows what will happen when they die, right? So I've had this conversation in like PSC, so like well-being class, and it was like a really, really deep conversation. And if like people try and find a purpose in life or will find some purpose in life because everything's gonna end the same. We're all gonna die, right? Nothing will last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Not even plastic will last forever, okay? Although, like, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like believing in certain things will bring peace or inner peace to some extent because you don't know, like, what's going to happen or why things happen. And I feel like, believing in these superstitions and heaven or hell or religion sort of maybe gives you a more like grounded feeling and a more maybe you feel more connection to sort of bigger beings itself and maybe like that like people find peace in that. I don't know. Wow, that was so deep.
Yeah, it's like it just goes down to that whole purpose thing. It's like you are part of something that's bigger than yourself, and it's your responsibility to play your role and make sure like the dominoes don't fall, I guess. It's oh man. This is deep.
That oh my God, that was so deep.
It's gonna get deeper, but like when you said about how different people view lives and how some people try to put themselves into the bigger scheme of things and how some people like want to have more control over their own lives, like what do you think causes that? Because to me, I believe that when we're born, it's like nurture that gives us our thoughts, our personality, our feelings, our outlook on life and things like that. But us, for example, we have kind of similar upbringings, but we still like have, as you guys said, you guys believe in some of the superstitions and follow some of the superstitions. But what causes this kind of divide that allows people to have different outlooks on life, to follow or not follow these kind of traditions and cultural beliefs?
Well, I think for one, like our ethnicity plays like a huge role, like the culture that we're brought up in. Like obviously the three of us are all Chinese. So it's almost like a given that the superstitions that we follow will like fall in line with Chinese traditions. And under that, there may be even more like niche superstitions that we follow based on like, oh, what province our ancestors are from, or like stuff like that. Like even yesterday, um, I never knew that there was a Chinese New Year dish called lo hei. Like I didn't know that until I saw Jasmine's story. Like, okay, well, actually, earlier in the morning, I saw it on TV, people talking about lo hei, and I asked my parents, I was like, "What the hell is lo hei?" And they're like, "Oh, it's like a dish for like good luck." And I was like, "Wait, why don't we have that?" And they're like, "Oh, we're not from that part of the country." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So like even these like tiny little things differ. But yeah, like exactly, like even JCA doesn't even know what lohe is. But like it depends on where your family is from, and like even though you're like maybe you might be from a neighboring province or like really, really close, even these little traditions differ, though we're celebrating the same holiday. So I guess this plays a really, really big role. But also back to like Rachel's point of like personality and stuff like that. Like maybe I have like this scientific bias or thing, but I was reading a book maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, and apparently genetics play like a huge role in like what sort of character you actually turn out to be, and environment, like nurture. How should I put this? It's like everyone has pre-existing genetic propensities towards certain things or characteristics, and nurture, like the biggest role that nurture actually plays is in amplifying your pre-existing genetic propensities. Does that make sense? It's almost like nurture is like the catalyst, if you will. It's like it catalyzes your pre-existing genetic propensities to be like good at math, or like to be like a selfless person, or to be very like curious and stuff like that. And I think, well, I only read that one book, and obviously I'm not just going to believe whatever that guy says, but his arguments were pretty convincing. And it sort of changed my outlook of how, I guess, the proportion of influence between nature and nurture.
Interesting. What book is it?
Oh wait. Okay, it's called Blueprint by Robert Plomin. So he's actually I believe he is a psychologist, but he's like one of the leading like psychologists who are like urging the whole community to like not neglect the influence of genetics. I think he's working at KCL right now, but I think he's originally an American. That will be my recommendation for today. I'll repeat it later, but that was my recommendation. It's a great book. I really like it. What time are we on now? I mean, I think we're in a good spot to end.
Okay.
And we'll cut some things here and there. That was a good conversation, in my opinion. It was insightful.
There was less smooth,
yeah. Yeah, so much smoother.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just said my recommendation, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But you guys can go ahead.
Jacia, would you like to go first?
Okay. Yes. My recommendation is to make breakfast. Make lots of different types of breakfast. Well, okay, one of them, you should make baked oats. For those who don't really like oatmeal, because I know oatmeal sounds really bad, but it's like the best thing you'll ever have. And I love oatmeal, but baked oats are far more superior. You can find a recipe like on Instagram, or you can follow my account at Pang's Cafe, where I do release lots of breakfast foods that you can make, and you can choose one from there to make in your mornings. Yeah, that's my recommendation.
So my recommendation for today is we actually have an Instagram for those of you who didn't know. It is at Walk is Happening on Instagram. So if you guys haven't followed us yet, you can go follow us right now. We post whenever we have a new episode coming out. And yeah, so go follow and like our posts. Thank
Wait,
you.
actually, on that note, I do have another recommendation. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please leave us like a review, or like rate us, 5 stars preferably, or like whatever. Like just please drop us a rating, because I think of all the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts is the only one that allows people to leave reviews. So it's like the most concrete, I guess, booster for the performance of our podcast. So please, 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 if you're listening, just leave a review, give us a rating, and yeah, thanks for listening.
5 stars if you want to be cool.
恭喜發財. And yeah, bye.
Bye.
Bye.